Okay, so I think that's sufficient time to get everyone logged on to Zoom. So I think I'm going to begin. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for attending our fourth webinar of the Unstoppable series. My name is Yashin Naran. I am a modern applications engineer forming part of the technical team. I work mostly on the manufacturing side using Inventor, Fusion, and AutoCAD Electrical. Today, I will be presenting to you rendering with Fusion. The session topics for today, we will start off defining rendering and get an idea of what the process entails. After that, we'll look at some of the misconceptions that surround rendering. Then we will discuss the benefits of rendering with Fusion and what it has to offer, followed by an overview of the basic rendering workflow, and then showcase this workflow in a demonstration. To end, we'll then have a short Q&A session. What is rendering? Well, rendering can be defined as the process of transforming a digital 2D or 3D model into a series of high-quality photorealistic images. The rendering process, of course, involves a computer application to make this transformation possible. The end product of the process would be the realistic or photorealistic images that are created. These images that are output are then referred to as actual renders. A great example of where rendering can be applied is within CAD design. The initial priority of any CAD design begins with the model and ensuring that the model design is mechanically sound and created within a suitable time frame. At this stage, the aesthetics and appearance are not too important, which means the model is often a low resolution, untextured, plain in appearance, and lacking that visual flair. However, once the model is completed, it will be refined through the rendering process in order to create a visually compelling end product. Now, we are going to have a look at some of the misconceptions or generalizations that surround rendering. The first off being that rendering is a costly process to pursue and implement. Often when the term rendering is brought up, it's attached to expensive hardware, computers, graphic cards, and software applications. This can include costs for outsourcing rendering projects or purchasing a dedicated rendering application. Another misconception is that rendering requires specialized skills, which involves working with complex and intricate rendering software applications. This means end users have to be highly knowledgeable, well-trained, and experienced when interfacing with these difficult-to-use rendering programs that require a lifetime to master. Lastly, the actual process of rendering is often perceived as being a very time-consuming task. This has to do with rendering as a process, using up all your computer's resources, taking a few hours to produce a single high-quality render. Fusion 360 and its cloud computing rendering capabilities address all of these misconceptions. What does rendering with Fusion have to offer? Firstly, Fusion 360 is a cloud-based CAM and CAD tool used for collaborative product development. It is a comprehensive and cost-effective application that contains all the tools you'll need for mechanical design, CAM, FEA simulations, generative design, and of course, rendering. This means there are no additional costs involved in purchasing a separate rendering application. Everything you need is inside of Fusion. Because Fusion is a cloud-based application, it uses cloud computing technology. This means that you do not have to rely on expensive local computer hardware. You simply need a system that can run the Fusion application. Rendering in Fusion does not require an extensive skill set. The process is streamlined and easy to use, enabling any designer to complete a beginning-to-end workflow by quickly transitioning from mechanical design to rendering in one click. A decent quality render can be output in a matter of minutes using a 4-step workflow that will be highlighted in the next slide. Time is saved by having the ability to process renders through the cloud. This means your computer resources are free and you can continue to work whilst your renders are being solved. Fusion rendering can be completed in just 5 easy steps. Firstly, apply appearances and add color to your design. Secondly, add textures and decals to showcase the finer details. Then adjust the environment, control the lighting to add depth to the design. To finish, the model can be sent to the cloud to be rendered and stored once completed. So just before we head over to the demonstration, I'd like to run a quick poll. And the question that I'll be asking you is, which bike frame would you purchase based on the following renders? So we have A, B, and C. A being the red one, B being the gold, kind of extrudes out towards the screen, and C is a little bit of a plainer version of it, a silver bike. Okay, wow, so overwhelmingly everyone has selected A. So I think people really do like the color red. Okay, so the results have been shared. Majority of people chose A as the bike frame that they purchased. All of these are pretty decent quality renders. B is quite nice. It gives you that depth perception, which is fantastic. And all of these renders, by the way, have been processed inside of Fusion 360. Okay, so now we're going to head over to the demo portion of this webinar. It will be showcasing that basic workflow of how to achieve high-level renders, or at least follow the basic process of getting a render out of Fusion.
Okay, so welcome to my Fusion 360 design workspace or modeling environment. And this is of course where we do our modeling of our mechanical components, ensure that it's mechanically sound before we process it to the rendering environment. You can see we are in the native CAD environment as everything is dialed down. So there's no textures applied to my set of headphones. There's no appearances, there's no textures, there's no lighting either. And all of those things that I've just mentioned will of course make this image look a lot better and more photorealistic. So in order to do any of that, I actually have to transform or transition to a new environment, and that will be rendering. And this can be done very quickly. So from my mechanical design, straight over to the rendering environment. Simply done with one click. So inside of my rendering environment, you'll notice a couple changes. The most noticeable change at this stage is actually the appearance of the headphones itself. Everything is a lot more refined here. Everything's a higher resolution as opposed to the CAD environment that we just came from. So you'll notice there are reflections, there's shadows, there's different lightings. Okay, the lightings of course controlled by the scene, which we'll have a look at in a moment. So if I rotate around here, I'll actually see the lights of the scene, light source. And those are of course adding shine and gleams onto my part. Now what we'd like to do from this point on is make this look real. And in order to do that, we're going to follow our basic rendering workflow steps. And the first step would be to apply appearances, okay, appearances and textures. So in order to do that, I'm going to head over to my ribbon. And as you can see, there are a limited amount of tools to use. So not very complex. Anyone can process rendering or do rendering inside of Fusion. It's quite straightforward. It is very streamlined and easy to do. So I'm going to head on or hit that little color palette quickly. That little color palette is my appearances. So it's going to open up my appearance library inside of Fusion. And what the appearance library inside of Fusion contains is a set of appearances that we can then assign to our model. Okay, so it's quite comprehensive. You can see we have a bunch of categories depending on the type of material that we'd like to use, the type of material that our component is made up of. So you've got leather, cloth, you even have things like liquid. Okay, so we've got metal, paint, wood, stone, and plastic. So those are some of the most popular ones. You also have paint. So how does this work? It's quite straightforward. You simply find a material you'd like to use, for example, brass polished. Simply drag and drop it onto your component or on the face that you'd like it to be assigned to, and then that will build on your model and give it more depth. Okay, make it look a little bit more visually appealing, increase the aesthetics on your component. So you can see that brass is quite nice, quite shiny. What I'm going to do is maybe go to another one. So some of these appearances have textures embedded inside, and what I'll do is maybe use some wood. Okay, so the reason I'm using wood is because you can actually see the texture on it. It's very nice. I'm going to use this 3D mahogany glossy. Just drag, and place it onto my headphone band. And with that appearance applied, you can actually see it's got the grain of the wood on it already. Okay, so I wouldn't have to model that. It looks quite real, and that will actually come out as quite a nice render. Okay, so there's a couple other components that need materials assigned to it, and the process is very straightforward. Simply drag and drop, find the category that you'd like to use, and you can of course play around with these materials, pick and choose as you will. So in this case, what I want to do is find some plastic. Okay, so headphones are made of plastic. I've kind of got a little bit of a sustainable design going on here with the wood. So let's have a look at some plastic. Okay, so I've got a whole bunch of plastic materials that can be assigned. What I'm going to do is just grab one of them. Okay, and simply start assigning it to my components very quickly. So once I've got that plastic, I'm not too sure about the white. It kind of doesn't break well with the scene or the background, so I may want to change the color. So with these kind of appearances inside of Fusion, you can manipulate them. So you've got very good control to change these appearances and make them conform to your components and the textures that you'd like to get out of it. So in this case, I'm editing the plastic appearance. So where you see all the white, and this little color palette appears. I can simply drag and manipulate it as I wish until I get a color that's realistic or the desired color I'd like to use in my design. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just play around with this a little bit until I find something satisfactory, and there we go. Okay, so I'm happy with that color, and I want to make this a little bit more realistic. Okay, because it's plastic, it's shiny, it's smooth, it's reflective. Okay, in your appearance editor, you can actually change these options. Okay, simply by dragging the manipulator. So you've got roughness. Okay, it kind of roughens out your appearance on the headphones. And as I'm manipulating it, you can actually see the appearance itself changing. Okay, super rough, no reflectivity, very smooth, no roughness, and that's kind of what plastic's going to look like anyways, very shiny. Once I'm satisfied with that, I'll just head over to the reflectance. Okay, so how much light is going to be emitted from the plastic? Okay, and of course this comes from the light sources in the light sources in the environment shining onto the headphone itself. Okay, so once I'm satisfied with those inputs, I can continue the process of assigning textures and appearances. Okay, so it's kind of a dual process we're going through now. And let's try something different. So let's do some metal. Okay, so I've got copper open already, so I'm going to grab some copper polish. So the polished stuff is always nice, bright and shiny. good reflections in terms of light shining off of it. So all I have to do is simply grab those materials and apply it to my part. So that looks quite nice. Next up is the cups of the headphones. So the cups of the headphones are actually cushions, and these cushions we want to cover in fabric. So just a little hint, if you want to make things look a little bit more realistic, you can model in some finer details. As you can see on the cups of the headphones, we've got little bumps, okay, to give it that foamy or cushiony effect. Okay, so for the cups, once again, I'll grab one of my favorite materials that I've stored is a custom red fabric. So this is appearance with a textured image that's been applied to it or overlaid onto it. And these textured images can actually be sourced out from Google or anywhere, PNG files. And they're quite nice. As you can see, if I zoom in a little bit more, you can see the little textured pattern that's on it. Gives it that overall nice realistic look and feel, which will then of course come out in the render. So on the other end, I'm going to do something very similar. Boom. Get that textured appearance. I think a close-up render on this would actually be very nice. Zooming in. Okay, so we've done our appearances and textures. First step was obviously appearances, so we've kind of transitioned onto the second step as we moved along. So the next one is still part of the second step in terms of rendering, is maybe applying decals. So a decal is going to be a logo or image or kind of like a sticker that is applied onto your components. And in order to do that, I just head over to my tools and I've got this little button to allow me to navigate to a decal that I've stored locally on my machine. And that's just going to be a PNG image of a Fusion Autodesk logo. I simply have to choose the face I want to place it on and define its position. So you can see that logo has been brought into my design, and I can make some adjustments to change its position where I want it to be and confirm. So that's quite nice. And these things like decals, of course, add to the realism of it. Okay, looks quite nice. Fusion Autodesk Fusion 360 set of headphones we've got going on here. Okay, so those are two steps we've completed: appearances, textures, and decals. The third step that we'd like to follow at this stage is altering the scene or the environment a little bit. Okay, so that's this little button over here. It's our scene settings, and here we can control quite a few things. Okay, the overall brightness. Okay, so how much light is actually being emitted from the scene itself. I don't know if these will actually brighten up as well. Yep, they do. There we go. Okay, so that's some controls. You can change the brightness, and the brightness, of course, is going to add more reflectance. Have more reflective or add to the reflectivity on the headphones, which will then showcase in the renders. Over and above that, we can change the background. Okay, maybe you want something a little bit plainer. You just want to highlight the components itself. You don't want any noise in the background. We can do that by having a solid background. So a couple things you can do quickly is we can toggle reflections. Okay, reflections, as you can see at the bottom, it shows a reflection of the headphones. We can change the focal length, okay, of the camera. Okay, so how we actually seeing this component, and do we want to stretch it out a little bit, give it that depth look, like as if we're looking at it from a distance. So this focal length, as you manipulate it, you can see it kind of gives you that fish-eyed look to your part. So another thing we can do is actually load predefined environments that come along with Fusion. So in your environment library, you have a couple that you can choose from, and as I toggle between them, you'll notice the impact it has on my headphones. Okay, the colors change, the brightness change, the positions of the shadows will also change, and this of course will have an impact on the whole output image of your renders. So if you've got some with a couple scenes, okay, I've got a snowfield one that's loaded. Okay, so what's this done? It's gone and placed my headphones in a snowfield, so you can see the background over there. So that just adds to composition and the story of the component. So it would be great to use if I had to put these headphones in a music store, for example, on display. That would make quite a nice render. So I'm not happy within that environment, so it's just way too bright. So I'm just going to head over back to my cool light. Once I'm satisfied with my scene settings, the next step is to render. Okay, so we can do a final render, but before we do that, we just want to take a look at how this may come out before we actually send it to the cloud to render. We're going to do a pre-render. Okay, a pre-render is an in-canvas render, and you can actually see or gauge how this is going to come out once we then decide to take it to a final rendering phase. Okay, so we can let it run for as long as possible or until it's at an excellent visual level, final or infinite. So once it gets to final, it will stop. I simply drag that to let it run or render for as long as possible. So at this stage, it's actually using my computer resources. But like I said, this is a pre-render just to gauge how long it's going to take. So once I'm happy with that, I can say stop and process my final and fourth step, which is doing the render and saving the image. And that can be done quite quickly. Okay, select the little teapot, which is my render button, and I can then decide the size of the image, okay, the amount of pixels, and its overall size. So do I want images that are going to be loaded onto a website, a mobile device? Are they going to be printed? Or do I want to customly define the parameters of the image that would be produced? In this instance, what I'm going to do is choose print 3.2 megapixels, and I can either choose a cloud render or local render. Local render is going to use local resources of your computer. Cloud render is going to take it to the cloud. Okay, it's going to use cloud credits. Okay, in this case, my render is only going to cost 3 credits. If you use standard, it's going to be a little bit cheaper, but it's of course not going to be as refined as a final output. But once I'm satisfied, I can select render. It gives me a time frame of 20 minutes. Okay, so what's going to happen over here is if I have a look at the bottom of my screen is my rendering gallery. Okay, so this is where all my renders that are sent to the cloud are going to appear. This one is going to process, it's going to take some time. So what we'll do is just go through a couple that exist over here. Okay, so I'll just go through a couple. You can see we have the one with the Autodesk logo on. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so over here we have another one with some modeled backdropping, so you can model additional features and bring them in. We also have a emissive light that was input into this design, just to give it that extra shine. Next up, we have something a little bit more plain, zooming on to just one headphone side. Okay, and the last one is just a 360-degree render, okay, giving us a rotational model. So it's actually captured a series of images rotating around the model and place them together. So once we are done with this, our renders are done, they are stored here. And as you can see, I do have one still processing. So whilst this is processing, I can still continue designing, working, creating more renders should I please. It's not going to affect my workflow or the work that I have to do at the moment. But once you're satisfied, you can simply download this, save it, and use it where you'd like: websites, manuals, guides, mobile applications, etc. So that summarized the basic workflow of rendering. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, so that was the demonstration of the basic rendering workflow that you'd follow inside of Fusion 360. Just before we end the webinar, we're going to start off the Q&A session. So there is a Q&A panel. Feel free to ask some questions. In the meantime, I do believe my is online and she would like to say a couple words. Okay, so I think we may have lost Helen along
Sorry,
the
I'm
lines,
here.
but I think oh, fantastic. Here's Helen.
Sorry, yes.
She'll give us a breakdown of what she'd like to say. No worries.
I was having a whole speech on my own and I was on mute, so I do apologize for that. Thank you everyone for joining. I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I did. We got some really good news on the Fusion offering at the moment. So just on the Fusion 360 package, we've got a 40% discount on at the moment, which is valid until the 16th of October. And then, so Fusion 360 is 6,800 Rand for a year. So it's really, really cost effective. And we're giving you 40% off that at the moment. And then we have another bundled special where we're offering Fusion 360 for the year, plus a 3-day online instructor-led training course, plus a license of Twinmotion. Twinmotion is also a rendering application to do walkthroughs, etc., of design, and that is 995, excluding that. Also valid until the 16th of October. Thanks, Yashin.
Awesome, thank you very much, Helen. So those are some great deals and quite cost effective, quite cheap, cheaper than what the PS5 and the new Xbox are going to be most definitely. So in terms of questions, let's head on to it. So there are a couple of questions that have come in. How do you orientate the part in the environment? So as per the demo, I was just rotating around it, but if you actually want to move the parts around, there is a tool. You'd have to move it in your design space or work environment, and you can move all your parts around just to situate them a lot better. We had another question over here. How do you add light sources and features like the corner with the blue concrete? So that's a nice little trick. To add light sources, your own custom ones inside of Fusion, there is a appearance, and that appearance is in the library. So what I did over there was I just modeled the feature as a solid. So it was just light that was placed into the scene, and I applied a specific type of appearance. It's called an emissive one. You can find it in the library, and you can actually control the color of the light's emitting, how bright it's going to be, so the luminance of it. And that's basically how it was done. Okay, so I see no further questions are coming through. I'd just like to thank everyone for attending, and I hope everyone has a fantastic day further. Enjoy. Bye.